Well, I'm delighted to introduce our guest today, Rob Kent-Smith from the Office of National Statistics. He's the coordinator here at the Office of National Statistics, and he was instrumental in establishing these new short-term indicators at a regional level, and also these short-term indicators to analyse the impact of COVID-19. So Rob, I'm going to pass over to you to introduce yourself, and then we can talk a little bit more about some of the indicators that you've developed.
Hi, firstly, thanks for having me, and nice to speak to you, Duncan. I mean, in terms of the ONS, for people who might not have heard of us, so we're the UK's independent official producer of statistics. We're independent from government, reporting directly to Parliament, and are independent from kind of political pressure and interference. And our job is to make sure in the public good that decision makers have the information they need to make good decisions. And that's not just decision makers sitting in central or local government, that's people in their business, people at home, lots of important decisions around where to base business, what your market might look like, where to buy a house, all topics that ONS data can provide a lens on. And we are now living in an environment where local data, local decision making, local impact is more and more important. And that's why local statistics are a real priority for us at ONS, and the pandemic has just put even more focus on that local perspective as well.
So Rob, I want to take a deep dive now into some of the statistics that you have been producing on a regular basis. So I'm just going to bring up on the screen now 3 that I've selected, so putting you on the spot a little bit, but I'm sure you can handle that. So the first one is the weekly online job adverts. You know, looking at the Yorkshire and Humber, you know, we have seen the data, you know, obviously job adverts dipped in the summer quite significantly, but it's been quite a strong rebound, which is a very positive sign. So what's behind this? You know, how are you doing the weekly online job adverts? And, you know, can we expect this data to continue going forward?
So one of the really important parts of this project and programme for us is to partner with people that provide data. So part of that is to actually minimise the burden on business, so that we're not coming out and asking business for lots and lots of information, but to use it where it's already available. So in this particular case, we're partnering with Adzuna, who are providing online job adverts. And we can take their data and then produce indicators, both at the UK level, but also at a more regional level. And here you see the series for Yorkshire and the Humber, notable kind of peak before Christmas there, and actually, you know, recovery from where we were pre-pandemic. Couple of, I guess, you know, words of caution. Sometimes these data can be a little bit volatile around the Christmas period and comparisons with previous years, depending on how the calendar falls. And also, you know, by nature of Christmas, lots of temporary jobs that tend to crop up, particularly around warehousing this year. You know, obviously that's been more of a factor than perhaps retail shops, just given the changing nature of people's spending patterns over the pandemic period. In terms of the second part of your question about, well, what happens next with these indicators, the programme is definitely here to stay. So the programme actually of kind of faster, more granular level data actually began in advance of the pandemic. And what the pandemic has forced us to do is really increase our pace and ambition around the programme to provide the data that people need to make decisions. So the programme's here to stay. One of the questions that we will have, though, is to make sure we continually respond to what decision makers and users need to make sure we're demonstrating value for money. So an indicator around job adverts, you can see that being a useful indicator, you know, month in, month out, you know, week in, week out. Some things that we're doing as part of our faster indicator suite are specifically in response to the pandemic. So, for example, people wearing face masks when outside of the house, and some adherence to restrictions. Of course, we all hope that over time that those restrictions will diminish, and interest in data around compliance with them will also diminish. So for us, it's about keeping it fresh and responsive to the data that people are using. But the programme as a whole, with its local driven principles, are absolutely here to stay.
That's good to know. Very good to know. So moving on to the second one I picked up was, you know, obviously you've been able to also get data, regional data on furloughing, and, you know, I find this quite useful in I can, you know, across the various industry levels to see which industries, not surprisingly, the service levels are high, you know, service levels are much higher than the others. Now, this indicator, is this going to be, you know, this is a weekly indicator, or what's the frequency of this indicator?
So this indicator is currently coming out every fortnight. This is one of those where we're reliant on businesses providing information to us. So I appreciate that many of you will probably, or your teams will receive forms from ONS every so often. Increasingly, those are more online rather than physical forms. But just to really emphasise, first to say thank you, and secondly to really emphasise the importance of returning and engaging with us, because that enables us to produce this type of insights. And actually, information on furlough really important. So it's really tricky to understand the labour market at the moment, because people are perhaps not. The furlough scheme is enabling people not to go unemployed at the current time. So it's difficult to get a read on what the labour market situation looks like and how much the labour pool is actively engaged. So these furlough data are really important, currently coming out every 2 weeks, and I suspect that will continue for the length that the furlough scheme is in operation, because I think it's a really important insight. One of the challenges we have within this regional data, and just to kind of give you a flavour of some of the complexities we deal with, is deciding where a business is operating. So of course, for many businesses, they might be operating amongst multiple sites, and to try and understand which bits of activity are happening in which part of the country is quite a challenge. And sometimes not just for us, but actually for business, to have a really clear idea of where the value added is added if they've got lots of different sites. So this analysis here is based on single site businesses, and that just enables us to be really clear about exactly what's happening in this case in Yorkshire and the Humber, but also other parts of the country. And that's a really important part for us, is to try and disentangle what's actually happening on people's own patch, in a complexity of not just domestically complex businesses, but also globally complex businesses as well.
Excellent, thank you very much. And then the final one I picked was footfall. Obviously, this is a very topical one, and it's very interesting for me to see this information coming out. I think this is weekly, and we can see that levels obviously peaking at Christmas and drop. This is a weekly indicator, I believe.
Yeah, so we publish this every week. I think we do have some daily data in there, but it gets quite noisy across the days. So the week's probably the place to go and the place to look at it. And you can see, very clearly the impact of restrictions. And you can see the kind of the English lockdown through November. The more recent restrictions, that definite kind of downward trend as we move through kind of the most recent set of restrictions. And of course, it's become really important, not just for us, but for everyone. When we moved to kind of the tier system, and actually, one size didn't fit all across England, and it was important to see what's happening at a more local level and in a more individualised way. And that's been a really important part of the jigsaw in explaining, what we're seeing, which areas we're seeing kind of more or less compliance with the regulations, and what different regulations are in place in different parts of the country.
Rob, I'm intrigued. How do you measure this one? Are you taking a number of towns, or what's the detail behind it?
Yeah, so this is again one that we work with a partner. So Springboard are our partner here, and they kind of collect the data on our behalf. From the top of my head, I can't quite remember exactly what their method is, whether it's a business report or based on cameras. We've got a number of these types of indicators, and one we do ourselves, which I can perhaps talk about a little bit more, although the geographic coverage isn't fully complete, which is why we tend to lead on the Springboard data. Our very clever data science people who are a lot cleverer than I am, take public access CCTV feeds, so data that we can all find on the internet, and look at CCTV cameras in various parts of the country, and they take that and they have a mechanism for counting the number of kind of traffic, the amount of traffic and the amount of people in different places based on those cameras, and can produce really interesting granular local statistics on the back of that. And Springboard will have their own methodology, but they're probably what we see as slightly more complete data than some of the things that we're working on at the moment, which is why we headline on their data and approach.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen the traffic data, which is very interesting. You can see the which try and sort of match with the footfall, and there's quite a strong quite a strong comparison there, which is very useful.
Different in different parts of the country. So I think what's really interesting in some of these, particularly London, I think is interesting because of the kind of the commuter situation in and out of London, and sometimes you can see different movements there to other parts of the country where towns and high streets might be a little bit busier, even without that commuter kind of impact going on as well. So it's really interesting to see that difference even between different big cities in the UK and how they're affected by various restrictions as well.
So Rob, obviously you've had a lot of demand for this. Is there any particular indicators which have proved most popular?
I think, to be honest, it's different indicators for different people. So I think a lot of people have been particularly interested in the footfall data, because I think that's a useful indicator of perhaps where people are spending their money and where economy might be heading or not heading, and the impact of restrictions. For other people, the furlough data has been really interesting, and the primary reason for that is because there's not a huge amount of other sources in terms of speed and timeliness. So often we will get an advanced insight because we're speaking directly to businesses, perhaps even quicker than the businesses have put people on furlough with HMRC. So actually this is really kind of timely insight, which is really useful. The other thing that we've started doing as well, although the publications on this have been a bit limited just because of priority, he's also starting to ask businesses about their expectations so that we can get a view not just about what is happening, has happened, but where they think things are going in the future. And I think that will be a space that we'll want to look at a little bit more fully over time when we start to exploit some of the data we're getting in more detail.
And you mentioned earlier you want to work with businesses more. So how do we respond to you to the indicators that we find most useful?
So quite often we've not yet, but every so often we do public consultations around some of the things that we're trying to do. But the other thing I would say and really encourage, and quite often I think people don't do this until they've done it once and realise it's a good avenue. Every release that we have will have an email address, a name statistician, and a phone number. If you've got any questions, you want to see something a little bit differently, you don't understand something that's in the release, or of course, nice for us, you just want to say this is great, thank you very much, keep doing this. Those numbers are always available. We love to hear from people, and it often can be open a lot of doors to people who are using data to find out about things that they might not have known exist or might not know about, and perhaps Duncan, I think probably some of our early conversations in advance of this were around flagging to each other things that we didn't really know about, and I think some of those conversations and connections are really important, which is why I really enjoy opportunities to speak directly to business like this as well.
Excellent, Rob. So finally, obviously we've got consensus data requests will be landing on our doorsteps in March, I believe, which is obviously very important for us to fill in. What is the ONS involvement in this consensus data? And do we think the turnaround will be quicker now, obviously with technology?
Yeah, so the census will land on people's doorsteps to be filled on the 21st of March, which is census night. This will be the first kind of predominantly online digital census. So there will be a lot more kind of online participation, and that will help us with the kind of processing of the data. But we have to remember this is a massive exercise. So we are the one time every decade that we capture information on every single person in the country. It is a logistical challenge, whether helped by technology or not helped by technology. So it takes a bit of time for us to do that, to understand the people who haven't filled in their forms and make adjustments to capture their voice as well. But what's really important in making sure it gets, is of good quality and represents people is that everybody goes out and fills it in and encourages it. So certainly our national statistician Ian Diamond was speaking to his senior team yesterday, and he talked very passionately about the census, it being his background, and he said, if you're at the bus stop, make sure you speak to everyone and tell them how important it is they fill in their census form. So definitely keep spreading the good census message, and it's really important actually. And this is a kind of more regionally focused topic. It's a really important source of information for allocating funds to local areas, for understanding local demographics. it is that real pivotal benchmark source that gives people the very detailed, granular understanding of exactly what's happened in their patch. So it's very important for a wide range of reasons. And for those who are family history geeks, such as some of my family, in 100 years' time, your ancestors will be able to find out all this data and look you up as well, which I'm sure will be more easier than some of my efforts, spooling microfilm and fish for census records from 100 or 200 years ago.
Excellent. Rob, I'd like to thank you very much. And this regional data that you're now producing is very important for us. There are a lot of regional disparities, and having this information to hand does enable local businesses to make decisions on a local level rather than relying on national data. So thank you very much for your time today. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thank you.